I do enjoy listening to you, India.
Arsenal win back possession, and it's broken nicely to Cazorla, 30 metres from goal, plays it to the edge of the area. Alexis Sanchez goes for goal and scores. That's a brilliant goal from Alexis Sanchez. He's been Arsenal's star man this season, and maybe now they're going to get the
right. Hello and welcome to Gooners in USA. Michael.
We didn't lose.
We didn't lose, and that's why I've got a little bit of energy about me, a little pep in my step.
A little pep, because we took some points off of Pep.
We did take some points off of Pep.
Son of a bitch.
Oh, man.
How's Denver treating you? Nice weather?
Woke up to a nice 7 inches of snow this morning.
Nice.
Yeah.
I thought you were just going to say woke up to 7 inches, which would have been a pleasant surprise, I guess, because growth is always good in a person's life.
Growth is always good, but I'm going to try and keep this family friendly, as we've just got a endorsement deal with Disney. Because
the endorsement is they pay us money and we never mention them again.
You know? Oh, that was the endorsement. Well, shit.
Yeah, you didn't read the fine print very well.
I never do. So, 2-2 draw with City. Surprising.
Yes. A little surprising, yeah. Surprising, enjoyable. I'm probably about halfway through my 3 weeks in Europe, and that was the first of the games that we caught with Arsenal involved anyway, and just we are having wonderful weather, by the way. Thanks for asking. Sunny and mid 60s or mid 15s or whatever, high teens. There's the weather report.
Just like you women, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. Jeez. Never answer a question before you listen to your actual question. But the greatest thing about being over here is just the game day atmosphere and just lapping up the atmosphere of Islington and Highbury and the Emirates on a game day. I just want to give a quick shout out, by the way, because spent a couple hours before the Man City game at the Gooners pub, so a shout out to them, place where I always feel at home, and met the Goonerholic named Dave from our friends at Burkamp Wonderland. He's the first of that crew that I've actually gotten to meet in person, and I'd like to think that I started at the top when it comes to the statesman-like and respectability, because you can only go downhill from Dave, because Dave's at the top of the heap. But class gentleman who actually came to the Gunners to say hi to Ted the dog and to Una, but also to come and meet me, which was really nice. And met one of our frequent question contributors, Bobby Chakrabarti, who is an absolute laugh to hang out with. Very, very funny guy.
And he genuinely means that, because he texted me about 5 minutes after meeting him saying, "I'm in love. My marriage is a sham." This guy is one of the funniest people.
You realize my kids listen to this.
Well, yes, Jake's smarter. He's old enough now. He's a man now.
Yeah,
but he did genuinely say that you thought he was a really funny dude.
Funny guy, yeah, great guy to hang out with. Total Gooner, and we're happy that he listens to the podcast.
But Mike, what kind of a parent lets their kids listen to this podcast?
A really shitty one. Really shitty one. You'll be there in 2 years. You know that when the baby, when little, what's his name going to be?
Oliver.
Or are we not discussing that?
No, it's Oliver.
Is it not Olivier?
No, it's absolutely not Olivier.
It's Oliver. Okay. When little Olivier is sleeping in his crib, you know that the podcast is going to be, the theme of get the fuck to sleep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
yeah, because it has the same effect on him as it does on the rest of our listeners. But yeah, it was a great day.
Yeah,
just put it that way.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. So, Mike, obviously you're over close to the Emirates, living amongst the hooligans that have now become the Arsenal supporters. Tell us, leading up to the game, what was the vibe like? I mean, you're seeing it firsthand. We're seeing it a lot over here in the U.S. on different social media platforms. So from your perspective, what was the vibe like leading up to the game, during the game, and after the game, since now that is something we have to be discussing, apparently?
It is, yeah. I mean, I will say it really depends on where you put yourself because, if you're looking for the drama, it's not hard to find. Twitter and other social media sites are making it very easy to find out if you want to show dissatisfaction, where to go, which of course also then adds the targets on the backs of those people, where if you want to start some shit with people who are going to express their dissatisfaction, where you could go. My goal on Sunday was to kind of just avoid all of that and go to places that I knew would just be, Gooner positive, because I didn't come all the way over here to express frustration. Even though I do have frustration, I want to enjoy this. So, we spent most of the pregame time and postgame at pubs, like I said, at the Gooners pub, at the Supporters Club pub. So, I didn't get a ton of the atmosphere outside the ground. There was a big protest group standing by what looked like maybe the director's entrance. It was right near where I picked up our tickets, and it seemed like people just kind of let them be. This was before the game. In the seating bowl, it was pretty typical Emirates. I didn't really observe any kind of banners or anything like that, but I was more watching the field than the stands anyway. But typical Emirates. It was too quiet, too sterile. But
were there empty seats?
Again, you'd think I would be going and like examining all these things so I could go back and report on them, but I was just trying to enjoy the day. There were some empty seats, certainly none near us, and it didn't look like empty seats to the point where it was an organized type of thing. I do think tomorrow night against West Ham might be a little different, especially considering it's a weeknight game, lesser opponent. Sunday was also David Rocastle Day, which kind of, I think, for many, overrode the desire to start trouble or express negativity just for one day. And that won't be the case on Wednesday. So it should be fairly interesting to see what happens then. But, typical Emirates, kind of day.
Yeah.
A little too quiet, but good game on the field, I think.
Yeah, it was an interesting game.
Except for the start.
Yeah, so let's go there. So friend and guest of the pod, Arseblog, provided a stat that in 2017, right, so we're only, 4 months into this year, there's been 5 matches where Arsenal have conceded in the first 15 minutes, subsequently losing 4 out of 5 of those matches. Obviously the 5th being the City match we drew. It's not good starting on the back foot consistently in these matches, Mike. And so do you think this is because we have a lack of team spirit right now? Do you think that we're just confident, just beaten to the ground? I'm not sure if those are the phrases to use, but,
it's something like that. I mean, how you start a game, to me, would just, random things can happen. Someone can slip. Someone can shut off for a minute. But just in general, for it to become a trend like this, how you start a game kind of, to me, would speak volumes about the motivation and the focus that these players have internally, and combined with whatever you believe they should have instilled in them by coaching or by training, and as to how to start a game, and by this sports psychologist that we apparently brought in for some reason that seems not to be paying off. It's not impressive to be starting off games like that. And, and that goes for even when it isn't a Man City or a Bayern Munich. We're still starting games off like that. I believe the Watford game, we gave up an early goal. If I'm remembering it correctly, but it is kind of it's a microcosm, I want to say, of where the team's head's at right now. And no, I don't think it has anything to do with the protests. These guys are big boys.
No, I don't think it goes that far. I don't think the players obviously know what's happening, but I don't think that equates to 11 men on the pitch.
It's not like they're standing around looking in the sky to see if there's going to be an airplane in the first 8 minutes. That's why the goal goes in.
If there's people that probably give 2 giant fucks about the protests, it's the players. because they're still getting paid a lot of money at the end of the day, and they just want to play football. But the game itself was quite decent from the perspective of going down and having to come back continuously and grinding out those results, because based off of the performances we've had recently, you would assume that against the city of Man City's caliber, you're not going to come back and claw back a point like we did. City, I thought, were a little bit more unlucky than us with some of the refereeing decisions, and I think they had one go off the post. And in my opinion, I think that David Ospina played fairly well to keep us in this game again. He was a lot. He was David
this time. He was just flat out David when he came in as a sub in the last game, but we'll give him David for this one. There were some reflex saves that he made that absolutely kept us from dropping all 3 points.
We're going to have an interesting summer this year, Mike, with keepers, because who knows if Czech will continue, and then you've got Szczesny coming back.
Does his contract expire this summer?
I don't think it does. I'm not.
Is it a 2-year or a 3-year?
I'm not sure, but he's getting up there in age, and I just wonder if with these injuries that he keeps having, if he'll call it a day. So it'll just be interesting because Szczesny's not playing too horribly in Italy, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Now, I did kind of, and I might have tweeted this, I don't remember, but when he pulled when he grabbed his thigh or hammy or whatever it was after that weird outlet kick that he made, that was the West Brom game, right?
Yes.
When he did that, I said, I'm thinking to myself, well, kind of like I did when Santi Cazorla went off. I'm like, okay, well, thank you for your service.
Yeah, is that the end?
It's been a pleasure. I feel like it is. I mean, perhaps he'll come back, with 4 or 5 games left in the season, but that certainly didn't look like the type of an injury you're going to want to rush back from as a keeper. And, with his age, especially if Ospina kind of keeps playing well, maybe gives him a taste of the possibility that he might be the number 1 next season. He might not be so anxious to go off to Turkey.
Right.
I kind of feel like that might have been it for Petr Cech.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I thought the overall performance was pretty good. Like you, it was an interesting game. It was a fun game to watch from a football perspective. I think a handful of players from Arsenal did a pretty good job of covering themselves in glory. Oh, that was there we go.
I can't believe you took that bell to England with you.
I've taken it to that bell has been to more cities in the last couple of weeks than that bell's been to Williamsburg, New Orleans, Washington, and London, and it's coming to Berlin with me. So that bell is getting more frequent flyer miles than Hector Bellerin.
That's what you should name it.
See what I did there? So Alexis's work rate was just noticeable. I mean, the old thing about you wait until you see it in person rather than on TV. I mean, it's as impressive as ever to watch him in person because you can. I mean, it just does seem. He seemed to me to be far and away the best player on the pitch of all 22 that were out there, and that's why it's making it so mind-numbingly fucking annoying to be seeing these headlines about the Chelsea thing. I mean, it is starting to take a more real shape to me, and I don't think he'll be sold to Chelsea this summer. What I fear is that he's just going to play out the last year of his contract. We'll refuse to sell him to Chelsea this summer, and next January, with us like in 7th place in the table, you'll see the pre-contract agreement announced, and I mean, it's just going to be scenes.
I don't think he'll. Oh God. I don't think, I don't know if I was the only person to have read those comments as I just want to see Arsenal win. I want to play for a winning team. I'm not talking
about those.
Well, no.
I saw.
So for me,
there's been more. I'm sorry, Andy. There's been more in the last day or two news about the negotiations with his team and PSG.
Yeah,
plus Chelsea.
I was going to say the PSG thing, I think, is going to gain a little bit more traction, specifically because the people that are coming out in France creating those stories are a little bit higher caliber than some of the folk on Twitter regarding this Chelsea story. So I feel more than likely if a €50 million offer came in from PSG, Arsenal would accept that this summer without having the confidence or without having Sanchez like saying, hey, I do want to extend. Let's go ahead and get this done.
Yeah, but it's not just up to Arsenal, though.
No,
Alexis has to decide to take his family and his dogs over to France instead of staying in London, which is why, I don't think his comments were a veiled threat of wanting to move to Chelsea, but I do think with the way that the next 8 months may pan out, the next 6 to 8 months may pan out going through the summer transfer window with all the Wenger stuff. And we're going to talk a ton about all of that with Gab Marcotti in just a few minutes. But the way that pans out, I think he may end up saying, I don't want to leave London, but I don't want to stay here either. And that's my fear. We may not want to sell to him, but we don't have to sell to them for him to go there. We just have to, find a way of getting him to PSG rather than Chelsea, and that's largely his decision, which is the state of affairs right now. But on the field, on the pitch, he's magical. I mean, just magical again to watch.
Yeah. With that being said, though, Mike, if Sanchez goes to Chelsea, there's a high probability that we see Hazard go to Real Madrid. And if you're Sanchez and you're looking at this league in particular, right, you're not guaranteed a trophy. There are 5-6 teams that will vie for that trophy. And in France, you're more or less going to win titles with PSG. So it's all hearsay, right? We don't know what's going to happen, but it's frustrating to know that our best player, yet again, is probably on his way out, and we can't control that.
Would this not be like 3 times worse than the RVP situation?
Oh, absolutely.
RVP was our player for 8-9 seasons. So in that respect, it was kind of a gut punch. But
he's not on the level of Sanchez. He's not as good as Sanchez, and he never was. And I think this is probably in lines with like a Fabregas type of situation where it's a player who seemingly loves playing for the club, has all the tools in his chest, but has decided that he can't get what he wants, and that's, consistency.
I see it as being so much worse than any of those for an Arsenal supporter.
I think on the cusp of if you compare it with other players that have left, it's a lot closer to Fabregas than anyone else,
But with the smallest sense as a frustrated supporter of, but yet I understand it, and that's what's the worst part about it. Is like, I mean, he'll be dead to me if he leaves. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like, can you blame him? Yeah, I would blame him because he should just put the team on his back. We should pay him. I mean, we should pay him handsomely. We should get rid of one of his dogs.
But Mike, I don't think that's the concern. He wants a manager that isn't a player's manager. He wants a manager that's going to fucking ride the team. He wants a player that's going to scream at the team. He wants a manager who's going to change and be methodical with that change. And that's not going to come for another probably 2 seasons, right? So I think if we offered him £300,000, ridiculous appearance fee, I don't think he's going to stay regardless. I think he's like, you know what, this isn't the manager that's going to drive me to get to that next level. I think this isn't the project.
This isn't the project I need to be here as I enter and exit my prime.
And maybe it's not specifically project. Maybe this isn't the project manager, right? Because if a new manager came in and said to Sanchez, "Hey, here's what my vision is. Here's what I feel like I'm going to do over the next 3 years. You're as big a part of that as any. I'm going to build it around you and number 11, right? And I'm going to put players in specific positions. I'm going to sell X, Y, and Z. And here's who I want to bring in." That's where Sanchez's boner gets hard and says, that's what I want. right? That's what PSG are going to do.
I'm glad you're plugged into that, but I agree with you. You're 100% right, and I'm just expressing my frustration with the fact that it is the reality, and that's where the could you blame him comes from. Depends on whether you sympathize with players who are paid a lot of money, still wanting more, or whether you feel they should just shut up and cash their paychecks and play the game they love. And that's an age-old debate that we could go back and forth on. But I agree with everything that you're saying, and it seems like a no-win situation. I hope I'm wrong. But all right, so let's move on from Alexis. Koscielny's hurt again.
Jesus
That's
Christ.
Good news. While Gabriel came on and I think he did a job. He put in a shift. I just tried to ring the bell and I almost fell over and missed it. So,
let's hit rock bottom, folks.
Yes, we have. But wearing the captain's armband is that's just curious to me because, isn't the captain supposed to be able to understand and communicate with the other 10 people on the pitch, or even like the referee, because he's supposedly the only person that could be talking to the referee to complain about a foul or something like that? How did he get the armband other than directly substituting for the captain? Yeah,
it's a weird one because twofold for me, and I'm going to go to Koscielny being injured first. Could he not have tried to play in the second half? It's like you're a captain.
Gary Neville?
Well, I agree with Gary Neville, and I don't know what Gary Neville said, but I'm agreeing with him if that's the case, because unless you are, he obviously wasn't, carried off at halftime. So what happened between the tunnel and the dressing room that didn't allow him to walk back out? Come back out and give 5 to 10 minutes of a run out. And
that is exactly what Gary...
Well, perfect.
Were you really not aware of the comments? Because that's exactly what Gary Neville said.
No.
Yeah, and he's been widely slated by many people for saying that when there's kind of I don't know. How do you know how hurt somebody is or not? Maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes of the first half, he was struggling so much just to get to halftime. I think it's kind of, and I know we've talked about this before with Aaron Ramsey, doing the substitution signal as he's on his way down to a seated position. The guys just, they're subbing themselves off before their injury even completes happening.
I was going to say is,
who knows with this one?
Here's what I was going to say before you rudely interrupted me again, Mike. And if I had a bell for every time you did that, I'd be ringing it consistently. What I would have liked to have seen was Koscielny.
The snow is not treating you well.
God damn it.
Oh.
What I would have liked to have seen is Koscielny try and come back out for 5 minutes minimum, right? And just give it, just say to the boys, dude, I'm hurt. I'm coming out, and let's fucking get this. Let's go out there and just start and get them motivated, right? Because as your point...
what if that costs us a goal?
But at your point, we come out, and fucking Gabriel is our captain, and everyone's probably looking at that guy being like, well, he can't even understand half of what I'm saying. So that's just the mentality right now. I would have loved, just personally, I would have loved to see Koscielny come out, try to push it, but we are just so injury sensitive at Arsenal, and it's the moment someone says, hey, Gaffer, I feel something, he's like, yeah, you're done for at least 3 weeks. Okay? Now I could completely wrong and he could have tore his Achilles, then I understand that, but that's probably not the case. But you're right, the captain's armband should mean a lot more than, hey, you're subbing in for the captain. And in my opinion, you've got players out there that could have definitely led the team a little bit better.
You would have probably wanted to see the armband go to Xhaka.
100%. I thought Xhaka personally...
I think Ospina would have been fine choice.
Yeah, Ospina would have been fine. I think Xhaka personally for me played a fucking outstanding game. He's still a little bit rash with some of these challenges, but I think he would have probably been the best suited player from the fact that he would have more than likely seen the rest of the game. Theo obviously would not have taken.
He was on a yellow. But his play, despite the yellow, was impressive. Given that he has a history of picking up a second one.
And but we've seen Xhaka sit on a yellow a couple games now. We're not giving him enough credit for that because there are challenges where he's pulling out. Now, Coughlin was very lucky to be on the pitch because he was sitting on a yellow, and that foul on De Bruyne, I think, would have in another match granted another yellow, but because it's City Arsenal, the ref probably thought, I'm not going to let it go down that path.
For once.
For once. But, again, why the fuck is Coughlin playing? I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen the armband go to Xhaka. I really feel like if we put that armband on him, we're going to see a very different player eventually come out with being just more verbal, and I think we're gonna see a more Patrick Vieira style of leadership, where he's not going to let a player get away with not defending on a corner. He will be in your face, and there will be fear.
And I think his kind of perceived right to do that may take a year or two to kick in, given that he's kind of new man on the totem pole. But, I mean, he certainly seems to have the character to do that. Speaking of captains and leadership, do you think that we see the return of Per Mertesacker tomorrow? He's in the squad. And frankly, if there were ever to be a game where I could deal with seeing him back in the starting lineup as our captain, it might be this one, given Andy Carroll's height, given our crying out for leadership on the pitch, given the fact that we're playing a team that we should be able to beat, and the fact that at this point we're kind of like, fuck it, we don't have that much to lose. We have top 4 to lose, but with Koscielny out of this game and our choices between Gabriel, who's obviously going to be the one who they pick, Holding, who doesn't seem to be able to get a sniff, or Mertesacker. If Mertesacker's fit to do 60, 70 minutes, it'd be the first time in years that I won't complain that he's in the lineup.
No, I completely agree with you 100%. If there's someone who's going to rule Andy Carroll, well, fucking hell, Mike. I mean,
he's going to get his 2 goals. I'm not discounting the fact that we can prevent that. But I mean, maybe he doesn't get 4.
I don't think we see Per tomorrow. I think that Gab and Mustafi are still the center back pairing. But you're right. If there is a player that could probably take some balls away from Carroll, it's more than likely going to be Per. But just thinking about how poor we are in defense coming into this match against Carroll tomorrow, Mike, it's kind of terrifying. Yeah. It's a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, I'm a little bit scared. I need to be held, but that's my problem. Do you have any? There obviously were fights. We're not going to talk about it, but I'm just going to say I didn't see any fights live between fans. I've seen videos of fights in the stadium. I've seen videos of fights on the concourse, fights including and surrounding, an obvious choice of where you think fights might break out, and not for the reasons that you might think, but unfortunately, some people really trying to start shit with Arsenal Fan TV. We are planning on having a chat, by the way, with Robbie later this week, and interested to get his feedback on all of the drama that's going on. Robbie's a good dude. He's in a shitstorm right now with what overreactionary people are doing with the channel. But we'll get into that when we talk to him. But unfortunately, that's where most of the violence seems to be. People who want to suppress opinions, taking it physically. But it was not widespread. It wasn't something where it's like frickin' a gladiator ring or anything like people are making it out to be.
It's anything else. It's like there's 3 or 4 videos that circulate around, and I think Arsenal is probably the best banter club, right? Because Mike, when you look at like the most followed sports franchises on social media globally, I think we're like 4th on that list, right? So everything that we post as a fan base is going to get retweeted and liked way quicker than the likes of the Scum, way quicker than the Chelseas. We're just in that social media platform. Robbie takes a lot of shit because he runs AFTV, so people just assume that for some reason he's at fault. And it's like the guy from the California trip, I met him briefly, seems like a genuinely nice human being. And here he is getting this abuse, which is totally unwarranted, or it's not even justified to even, you wouldn't want to see a Spurs fan get punched in the face or pushed. You just wouldn't. As a human being, that's not right. Banter
there was a video
them.
Years ago of somebody on a tube train, I believe, he was a Spurs fan and just getting absolutely abused, and it was hard to watch. I mean, just
it totally is.
Any human being.
If you're
don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger.
If you're going to banter with them, great. If you're going to sing and you're going to slander them via song, great. But the moment you lay a hand on someone, you're crossing the line, and especially when it's one of our own. And you know what? The guy has a platform, and it's what he does now, and you just got to move on and live with that. And he seems like a genuinely nice guy, and I'm interested to talk to him this week. It's going to be kind of nice to not talk about what people perceive. We're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of Robbie himself, and so that's going to be a lot of fun. But to see this as our fan base right now, there's already embarrassment surrounding us with our performance on the pitch. Yeah. And then we've got the playing gate, and now we've got this. It's just everyone calm the fuck down. It's a football team.
And there's so much still up in the air that people can't agree with. It is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I hope it doesn't cross into yet another level of just debauchery between fans. But, it is what it is. People are fucking jackasses sometimes. But yeah, so we'll looking forward to that chat. What else we got about this game? Are we going to be able to hit top 4?
Oh, so we're 7 points off, Mike. 10 matches remaining. I truly think we have a challenge on our hands.
Oh yeah.
And it's not just can Arsenal win out? It's are other teams going to lose? Because you're starting to see City hit form. You're starting to see Man United squeak points. We're not going to finish above Tottenham this season, which sucks, but I really don't care about that. I never have. It's always fun to laugh and joke, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking if you're not champions, it doesn't matter.
That shouldn't be a goal.
No. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, when you see the schedule come out, the first two things I look for are when are we playing Tottenham, and I want to beat them twice. But if you're going to finish second and they're going to finish third, who gives a shit, right? Neither of you finish first.
Right.
So at the end of the day, that means nothing. In 10 years from now, we don't know who's going to finish where. We won't remember. But I think top 4 might be out of the realm of possibility this year, Mike, which sucks to say because I do want Champions League football. But
yeah,
I mean, do you think we're going to cash?
We have one game in hand, and it's basically one of Leicester or Sunderland or Southampton. On the rest of the teams in front of us. So it could be as little as 4 points off the top 4. It could be as many as 7, but it feels larger than that because of like you said, the form of the teams that are in front of us seems to be improving. I mean, there's not a single one of those teams that is in rapid decline. Whether United is strong enough or not remains to be seen. That may be the best opportunity for us to catch them, but that still only puts us in 5th. Liverpool seems to be mostly showing up for games, and Tottenham's doing what Tottenham does, at least until May. We'll see if they collapse again, but it just doesn't seem like it is going to happen this season. And, I'll live with it. I'll be interested to see what happens with it, but it's certainly going to be, and again, we'll talk about this. This is part of our discussion with Gab coming up shortly as well, about, whether top 4 is what it used to be or whether it's what it, it's what it's cracked up to be at this point. I might have a different opinion to Gab on this, but, I think it's kind of necessary. But it is what it is. Que sera, sera. The one thing I just want to mention, to wrap up our game points is that I am very disappointed in Arsenal's, in one very easy way to show appreciation and respect for David Rocastle on David Rocastle Day would have, and it's not to say they didn't acknowledge it at all, because they did on social media, they did in various ways, but the game program, he should be on the cover of the game program for this game every year. And not only was he not on the cover, there was not a single mention that I could find, and actually a few people pointed this out on Twitter late night Sunday with Robbie from AFTV. The two of us just kind of paged through the entire program, not a mention of David Rocastle anywhere. And, that just made me sad because, this is always a game where you celebrate the life of Rocastle, who I was just fortunate enough to spend 2 years watching patrol the midfield at Highbury. On the 16th anniversary weekend of his death, it would have been nice to have him in the program. And that, and I don't know if it's an oversight or if it's just a sign of how out of touch the club is with its roots and its history, to not have made that gesture.
Yeah, it's a little strange that there would be nothing in the in the program.
You could debate with if there was just a picture and like in memoriam type of thing, and then that was all there was. You could have said, oh well, should there have been more? Should there have been less? But how can you debate there not being a single thing in there? And if there is, and I just missed it, my apologies. But we took a pretty close look, and there was nothing there.
But I wonder if on previous anniversaries of him passing, if that's been the case too. So that'd be interesting. I bet Danny collects. I bet Danny would know. Let's ask Danny, GFP.
Yeah, Danny, where are you?
Danny, answer the question. Damn it.
The first game at Emirates that I came back to was in 2013, and it was the same. It was the first game after the international break. I think we beat Reading 4-1, and that was Rocastle weekend as well. And I just remember that game a lot more for the Rocastle, the chants, the names on the screen, and I feel like he was in that game program or on the cover of it or something. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like this time was a lot less about David Rocastle than that time was, and that just may be, as the years pass, the importance of it fades, but it should never be that way.
No, it shouldn't.
It should never be that way.
No.
So that was the game. We got a couple of very good listener questions, and then we're going to bring in Gab Marcotti for our chat. First one, Andy from AJ, former and soon to be future guest AJ from the Full 90 Gooner podcast.
Rest in peace.
Would you put Elneny into our midfield more? Xhaka and Koch have been relatively poor this season and also have picked up a lot of cards. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I don't know why he's not getting a little bit more run and play. I think that out of the three of those players, he would be the most likely to sit deeper and allow the other Coughlin just fucking roams wherever he wants to go, but it gives Xhaka a little bit more opportunity to push slightly forward and kind of be that transition play guy, right? So, I would play him 100% over Coughlin for sure. Mike, I ask you...
What if Ox is healthy?
I was about to say, if the Ox is healthy... and he is, available to play in that central midfield position, it gets a little bit trickier. So who would you take, Elneny or the Ox? Or would you play those two together and bench the other two?
Well, at this point, I think you kind of got to roll with Xhaka and get him really, really bedded into the team at this point. I think I'd rather see Elneny out there than Coquelin in any circumstance for the exact reason. I don't have a ton of memories of the gameplay itself because I don't have the ability to go back and rewind it and rewatch it like I normally do, being at it. But I remember pointing out to the boys I was with how often Coquelin was the furthest guy up the field, and it's just. That's unacceptable. That should never be happening. And then was trailing the play going back. It's absurd. So I would save Coquelin for an injury replacement and injury replacement alone. And then really kind of game plan whether Elneny should be in or Ox based on the opponent and based on the situation.
What's super frustrating about Coughlin, Mike, is, when he came back from Charlton, he really impressed us with his play because he would cover probably 60 yards of the pitch. So in the middle was basically where he did most of his work, right? And he would just nip at players. And when the ball got got passed from player A to B, he would be on player B almost immediately, and he would continue nipping until Arsenal won the ball back. What player in the Premier League right now continues to do that? Has gone from one championship winning side to likely another. Someone who was sold this summer. Conte. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's like, that was the type of player that we were seeing in Coquelin, where he was just aggressively chasing that ball down. He was aggressively just getting in the player's way. He was just being that annoying player. Now we're seeing Coquelin, who wants to make the Cruyff passes, who's, like you said, way too far up the pitch. I think someone put on social media a picture where he was in line with Theo at one point when City were coming the other way. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? And I don't think that El Nini wouldn't have that lack of discipline. Now, you can get called out in the passage of play, right, if you're not the fastest player going back. But I don't think El Nini would have ever seen himself go higher up the pitch than Xhaka, for example, or the Ox, if that's who he was playing with. I think he would have the mind to go, you know what, my job is to support this back four. But I fear now, Mike, that Arsene has told Coquelin, this is what I want you to do. Because there's no way that the coaching staff aren't saying to him, dude, you gotta just be disciplined. You gotta stay in your little zone. Like he
can't keep getting these starts through ignoring the coaching advice.
Absolutely.
So he's clearly following orders.
Or there's no orders given, and they're just saying the two of you have free range. Just communicate with one another. Hopefully, that if you're pushing high, the other one's dropping deep. Okay.
And to my defense, I would have answered your question about Conte a lot sooner if I hadn't been completely thrown off by the text of Donald Duck, the pornographic text of Donald Duck that you sent me while we were talking about. So it's not that I don't know which midfielder was transferred from one league champion to another. It's that I have to look at Donald Duck's boner on my phone.
There was a recent video though of Conte where, like, in a 3-minute span, Chelsea were playing, I forget a team, but he was literally on top of every player that got the ball within this like little 3-minute span. And I thought back and I was like, man, I remember when Coquelin used to do that when he returned from Charlton. And it was like,
and now he just bounces off the back of Eden Hazard.
Right, and I was just like, where did that player go? Because he hasn't like lost a lot of pace. He hasn't like become an older player where he has to make up. So it's just like that's what
tactical.
Absolutely. So to answer AJ's question, I would definitely start El Nini over Coquelin any day of the week.
Yeah.
And then
except for Thursday, let's.
Well, yeah, right. But for me, Coquelin isn't good enough to play for the Arsenal. And I know that's going to upset some people saying that, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I've come a long way from just earlier this season saying that I thought he had finally gotten it. I think there's an episode called Mike Loves Cock. And I've just completely, from there, his tactical usage and discipline has just gone through the floor, and I couldn't feel more differently about it now. So, did we get a second question?
We did. Alfredo from New Orleans. Is that the accent down there?
Yes.
I don't know. 2 questions. Best time to go see the Arsenal if you've not made the trip. 2, or is this B? Besides the match, what else do you recommend?
Well, the best time to go see the Arsenal depends on what you're looking for. Because if it's peace and harmony and satisfaction on the pitch, this right now would not be the suggested time, I think, to go see them. But
I'd say Christmas for 2 reasons.
Yeah, I'd say either October, which is
you get some Champions League.
You're more than. Well, yeah, I guess that might not even be relevant anymore, depending on what happens. But yeah, you'll usually get to see a Champions League game, and probably if you play your cards right, there'll be 2 weekend games surrounding it that are accessible or at home, or the festive period in December.
Yeah, festive is great because London at Christmas is magical. And you do get a lot of run of games, and so you're more than likely going to get the opportunity for a home and away, if not 2 homes and away. So I would say Christmas because there's just so many football games that you're able to see. And for any Arsenal fans that are traveling over, whether it's this season or next, truly join Arsenal America because their ticket allotment program is next to none. And if you're an American Gooner traveling, it's very high probability that you are going to receive a ticket to at least one home match if you put in for 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, and frankly, I've never had. I mean, if you have plans early enough, I've never had an issue being able to get tickets, and sometimes there's late changes where you can even get a ticket late on. But definitely the best route to get tickets. Don't go through touts. Do not go through touts.
Yeah.
And speaking of, when you mentioned the festive period and how many games there are, to the second part of, what else do you recommend doing? One thing I always recommend doing is catching other games that are not Arsenal games, whether it's, an away game for Arsenal in London, as I'm lucky enough to go to next week against Palace, is phenomenal. But go to Fulham, go to QPR, go to Palace if you get a chance to do that. Don't go to West Ham or to Shite Hart Lane. The atmosphere is, in one, it's Shite Hart Lane. The other is just zero atmosphere at West Ham. But, the Emirates, if you haven't been to the Emirates, you need to go. If you haven't seen Arsenal play live in person, you need to go. But the atmosphere is not going to do much for your vision of what English football is all
about. Seeing an away game is truly the way to see the Arsenal because you are nestled in 4,000 or 5,000 away supporters and you sing the entire time. And I went to last season the Boxing Day match against Southampton, and it was where we lost 4-0. And I think
thanks for that.
I think at the 3-0 mark, we collectively as a group, because it was towards the end of the match, decided to leave. And Southampton did the on cue, has there been a fire drill? And that stopped about 200 Arsenal supporters from leaving, walked back to our seats, and we just started singing Up the Pompey for the rest of the game to really upset the Southampton supporters. So there's just a different level of camaraderie in sport when you can get an away ticket. So definitely I would recommend trying to get an away ticket and sit in the away end.
And see, but even if you have to nestle in to Palace with the home support, you can be neutral, wear a black shirt, and just breathe in the atmosphere because in those kinds of stadiums where the fans are all on top of each other, the acoustics are, there's just, the atmosphere is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. Also, game day, just walk down Gillespie Road from the Tube about 2-3 hours before the game and just smell Arsenal. It's a weird thing to say, to smell Arsenal, and by the way, my hotel room right now doesn't smell anything like Arsenal, but it's just the burgers, the scarves, just the whole atmosphere. It's just hard to explain until you've done it, but you've got to just take that walk. Obviously, I highly recommend Piebury Corner. We will shortly be releasing a conversation I had with Paul, who, along with his wife, owns Piebury Corner. So I don't mean for this to sound like a shill or an advertisement or anything like that. It's just truly the things that I enjoy when I'm here. And the pub life, Gooners Pub, Supporters Club Pub. There's tons of other pubs like the Tollington and the George and 12 Pins, and just enjoy the atmosphere. It's a nice part of town. It is, if you have any connection to it through Arsenal, it just feels like home, and that's it. Obviously, if you haven't been to London, there's a lot of other touristy stuff that you should do, but that I don't think was the point of the question. But there's nothing better than just spending a whole game day in Islington and just breathing it all in. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Alfredo, for yet again another good question from you.
Love your
speaking of other stadiums, I will be heading very quickly. I'll say that I'll be heading to Vicarage Road tonight for Watford West Brom from Joey Murphy, who went there last year as an away supporter for Arsenal when we played them. He said that it's a fantastic place to catch a game, so I'll be sitting in the Elton John stand tonight, biting my tongue. And then it's off to Emirates again for West Ham tomorrow. So now, just to introduce a quick chat, quick by my measures, with Gab Marcotti, who I have an interesting connection to, which you'll hear about shortly. But we'll go ahead and play that for you now, where we talk with Gab about kind of the state of Arsenal, the future, what the next few years looks like, and another very interesting topic that I think many of our listeners will be shocked to hear about. So let's, without any further ado, and bring Gab Marcotti on from the Times and from ESPNFC. Gab, for joining us today.
Great to be with you guys.
Thank you. And Gab, we have been looking forward to having you on the podcast for years, which is weird because we've only been doing the podcast for like 7 or 8 months. But really excited to have you join us today. Our first kind of...
But weirdly, Mike, we've known each other for nearly 30 years, so that's kind of freaky.
I was going to get to that because, and let me, after I introduce you to the one or two listeners who may not already be familiar with you, we'll get into the backstory a little bit, which is an interesting one. You are best known for being a columnist for the Times newspaper here in London. And, you also host their football podcast called The Game, which is a good listen, always good guests and good banter on that. You. And can regularly be seen on ESPNFC for those of us in the States and who have access to that as a senior writer for ESPNFC, also on the TV version of it.
Not just in the States. Sorry, I should point out ESPNFC. You can catch us in North America, throughout the Caribbean, in the UK on BT Sport.
Like I said, Gab, it's worldwide ESPNFC. I mean, it's not just in the States.
Worldwide leader in sports, yes. And in Africa, too, on Quasi Sports.
Excellent.
And, of course, digitally around the world. So
fantastic. Well, yeah, that was my typical American moment, just thinking that we had ESPNFC all to ourselves. I guess that's very stereotypical of me. But
no, you don't. But you know what? Maybe they'll put maybe you shouldn't have put sort of tariffs on exporting media content to help pay for the wall. On. Maybe somebody.
I didn't put those on, Gabby. Let me just be clear that I am not actually in charge of that sort of thing.
Okay.
But we got to get to. I love getting directly to the elephant in the room because I'm usually the elephant in every room. But the biggest issue we have to cover is from, like you said, almost 30 years ago. Gab, as a high schooler living in London, there was a blacktop pitch somewhere in St. John's Wood on the playground where you witnessed a magical footballer ply his trade. And do you remember that guy's name and whatever happened to him?
You're about Dave Blythe.
No.
Nico Montoya?
No, I'm talking.
No, okay. I will say this about what stood out about Mike as a footballer. And I say this in the best possible way as somebody who is also considerably more ample now than he was back then. And you may not believe this, Mike's biggest asset was pace. He was sort of stringy. And
3 words
and he played up front.
Put together. Sorry.
Honestly,
Mike, asset, and pace.
The finishing sometimes left something to be desired. I remember a game against Tassis.
That's what she said.
Well,
sorry.
I remember a game against Tassis which you were through and somebody hit the ball over the top and you just completely eluded him. You were running diagonally, and maybe because you were running diagonally across the goal, like your finish ended up going out for a throw-in, which was kind of odd and difficult to do. But you did get yourself in dangerous positions through the fact that you were generally quicker than most of the defenders we played against.
First of all,
you sound like a Theo Walcott, Mike.
I was just about to tell you. I had Theo Walcott's pace and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's throw-in finishes, but I mean, what a young prospect I was at the time, and I actually am giddy, Gab, considering how your life and career the trajectory has gone, that you actually remember that and just shared it with the world. I'm gonna write down the quote. I'm going to make a T-shirt of it, and I'm going to walk around. It's going to be like a 4XL T-shirt, unfortunately, these days. But, Mike, I used to have pace.
And our own memories of athletic achievement inevitably, stand large, and we remember those more than we remember things that happened this morning.
Yep, and zero foot skills. I mean, zero foot skills. And we want to just put it that way. That's where my son, fortunately, has surpassed my play already. Is he's very skilled on the ball, but we'll deal with that another time. Yeah, Gab and I went to high school together in London. I'd say you're right up there with probably the most publicly accomplished or famous people from our class, but you're probably in a neck-to-neck race with Steve-O from Jackass, who was also one of our classmates, if you remember.
No, he wasn't.
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
really?
He was a year below us, actually.
Wow.
To be fair.
I believe he scouted some of our football as well from the confines of his own skateboard.
Yes, yeah, and used to do things like eat pint glasses and put lighter fluid on his arm and set it on fire, and all the things that you would expect a future Jackass star to get into.
Wow.
Yep. And I grew up to do a podcast with Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, who hit it big, Mike?
There's still time there's still time remaining. We'll see. The clock hasn't run out yet. But no. So getting back to the real football. While you're not an Arsenal supporter, as most of the people we have on the podcast are, you obviously do have some interesting insight into the people and the state of the team right now, which we've chatted about it a little bit offline, Gab. But I think it could be useful to get some points of view from outsiders, from informed outsiders, people who aren't as emotionally invested as Andy and I can get, and most of our usual guests are. So, kind of start right off with the whole topic of the day, which is the Wenger versus Kroenke discussion. And we chatted a little bit about this. I mean, what do you see as being the real issue, or is it more complicated than just one or the other? Kroenke's ownership is seemingly a disaster to most people, but you're not really hearing his name a lot in these protests and the Twitter wars and all that. But I mean, what do you see as the shape of the club being and the root of the problem?
Well, you're right. You're not hearing Kroenke's name, which is kind of ironic because you would figure ultimately he owns the majority of the club, and if somebody wants to step up and make a decision, then it's going to be him. Even Ivan Gazidis can't go and make a decision without Kroenke's say-so on this matter. And the reality is that, I spent, Wenger and I arrived back to London around the same time, and then I've had the privilege of spending time with him on many occasions over the years, but I don't know, and so I don't know well enough to say for sure, but people who know him a lot better than I do say that he really does not want to exit on a low. And were he to, come out now and say, yes, well, I'm leaving, then...
Ooh, someone else that does a good impression. I've been known for doing an incredible Wenger impression on this podcast that Andy's banished permanently from it, but I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just was so impressed.
I try. I've had practice. No, that would be kind of like throwing in the towel. He doesn't want to do that. I think he cares about his legacy and he wants to give it a shot. And I don't think at this stage, now that things have gone south, it would be helpful. Or he sees it as helpful. He's not a quitter. You don't get, if you look at Wenger's career trajectory and where he started from as a footballer and stuff, you don't get that far if you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself and in what you do, and if you don't have kind of that bulldog spirit that you don't want to quit. And so for that reason, if Arsenal had won the Premier League this year, then maybe he'd say, okay, time to go. But he does not want to leave. Yeah, and I think that part is understandable. What doesn't fully make sense to me is how this decision seems to be in Wenger's hands, and that to me, that to me says two things. one, another year of Wenger isn't going to damage the value and the Arsenal brand significantly. And I think ultimately that's what Kroenke really cares about, because he's a businessman. So he can live with that. On the other hand, Kroenke does not want to step up and make the decision for Wenger. Were he to speak, and he doesn't because he's Silent Stan, he's kind of like, did you guys watch Orange is the New Black?
Yes.
Yeah. Andy did. Andy watches some of those shows for me and then reports back to me.
The shows that we're sitting in prison.
Exactly.
I'm glad we have the same taste. He reminds you a little bit of like the, you know the woman who works in the kitchen and doesn't speak. But
yes.
Everybody kind of like listens to her. Yeah. He reminds me of that a little bit, right? So he's not going to go out and take responsibility for the decision of sending Wenger away after 20 years. He's shown no inclination he's going to do that. He's shown no inclination either of, kind of like sort of lurking behind the door and sending Gazidis to go and do that. So it rests entirely on Wenger. And that, to me, I don't know. I don't think it's the ideal way to run a football club, because it stops you planning and then it has all these knock-on effects. But by the same token, the guy's far wealthier than I am, so from a business perspective, I guess he's weighed up the pros and cons and says, you know what, I can live with the risks of another year with Wenger. I can live with a worst case scenario, and I'd rather do this and leave it up to him.
And I think they're misjudging. I think they're misjudging the mood, though, on the streets, and I don't mean literally the streets, although maybe.
Well, Mike, I think to address that, that's why Ivan came out this week and made such a vague comment about how the board has decided that change is needed. And so, Gab, do you feel like that's just something Ivan is saying to the supporters, saying, we hear and see what you're doing, but really there's going to be no change until Arsene decides 100% for himself?
Yeah, I think that's kind of exactly how I see it, actually. And you know what? I mean, maybe at best they can push through some changes to, and sell Wenger on the fact that, okay, you're going to stay another 2 years if you sign your contract, if you want to stay. But in the meantime, we have to plan for the transition, so we're going to groom, these people in footballing positions. There's been talk that Dick Law, who's sort of Wenger's negotiator on transfers, that he might go and whatever. It could be that. It could be the fact that they can go to him and say, Arsene, we can't be left in a situation where, if you decide to stay, understand that we can't be left in a situation where 2 years from now you walk away and you're gone and Ivan's gone, and Dick Law is presumably gone, and then all of a sudden there's nobody left to run the football club and we have to start from scratch. So let's start thinking in terms of succession. Let's start thinking about guys who, we can bring in to work under you or with you for a year or two and then take over after you, not necessarily as manager, obviously, but in all those other positions around them at the club.
Is that where some of the discussion about Pires and Vieira starting to gain steam, about kind of getting some people in that are football people?
I would imagine that's the case. And I would also imagine that, from what I know of Ivan Gazidis, he's a smart guy and he actually cares about Arsenal. So all his hands are tied in some ways. In other ways, this is something realistic that he can do that can hopefully progress the club a little bit. When I get a little bit wary when people mention, I honestly don't know. Has Robert Pires, has he had any involvement in football other than, celebrity five-a-sides since retiring?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's he seems to be a popular person that's being brought in to be director of football, but I'm not quite sure where the historical CV comes from for him to do that. Vieira's obviously got some coaching.
Yeah, a director of football is actually a very serious job where you have to have a legal mind, you have to have a negotiating mind, you have to have a technical football mind, you have to have a Rolodex. You have to have an iPhone filled with contacts around the world. Patrick Vieira, for me, from what I know, would certainly appear like a more viable candidate to do that. Certainly, but the problem with Guerra is twofold. One is he's obviously decided to coach, and maybe he likes that better at New York City. And B, he left Arsenal a long time ago. And from what I understand, there's been no real desire from the club to ever bring him back. And when he had to go and do his apprenticeship and whatever else and then be groomed for a role in football, it was City who said, hey, come here and do it here. You've had a number of
City's been better to our guys than we. City's been better to our ex-players than we have over the last 10, 15 years.
That's the irony. So, do you then go and tap on his shoulder and say, hey, Patrick, why don't you come here? The other thing, too, is, so much about football is relationships. And obviously, Patrick was such an important part of Arsenal for many years. But by the same token, he was there before Kroenke. He was there before Ivan. And you also imagine a future where Wenger and Ivan leave, and I think they'll probably leave at the same time, or roughly the same time. So who's going to be the guy who's going to go to Patrick Vieira and say, hey, by the way, you love Arsenal. Look, we are Arsenal now, even though it's a different stadium and different people and different owner and whatever else. And why don't you go turn your back on City, who gave you a job and gave you all sorts of opportunity after you retired, and come back to us? Is there not just one person? I mean, is there not just one person that can do that at this point? Who?
And that's Arsene Wenger? I mean, to say I made a mistake, which I don't think those words have ever left his mouth, but I'm staying here another 2 years, and I want some transition, and I don't know. I mean, that's just such an idealistic thought, but I just think it would be meaningful for him to say that. And the Vieira rumor from where I first heard it started from Perry Groves, who kind of threw that out there on Arsblog's podcast last week. That he intimated that he had heard rumblings about it, which again, in this day and age, even when you have an ex-player who used to be involved and still is tangentially involved with the club, leading tours of the Emirates, mention something like that, you got to give it a little bit of credibility, I suppose. But
I think it would be. I mean, I've met Patrick Vieira. I've spent time with him over the years. He is a super smart guy. He's a great thinker. He's somebody who's worked in different countries. He's a winner. But by the same token, he's also a human being who presumably has a mortgage and a career path like everybody else. So maybe he doesn't have a mortgage. Let's be realistic here. But still,
he splashes the cash around for his houses. Let's be honest.
But to be fair, like if you were Patrick Vieira. And, let's take your scenario. Let's say Wenger says, well, why don't you come here and, work with me in some role for 2 years? What if the next 2 years absolutely bite the big one? Or you absolutely stink? Ozil leaves, what's-his-face leaves, Sanchez. He becomes obsessed with Walcott even more than he is now. I don't know. And everything's bad, and, Arsenal have back-to-back sixth-place finishers. Does Patrick Vieira then run the risk of becoming Ryan Giggs in the eyes of many? Is he really viable then to take over being a meaningful role? Does he want to be on potentially a sinking ship, potentially without an owner and a chief executive who we trust and has a relationship with? Relative to perhaps City, where
he could be next in line
and call. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, he can pick up the phone. But what I do know is he can pick up the phone and call Khaldoon or Mubarak whenever he wants, and whatever servant picks up Khaldoon's phone will then call him back within minutes.
What if it's the same servants that work for Kroenke, or like the cousins of the same servants that work for Kroenke?
Exactly. I don't know if that's the case with Kroenke. I don't know if that's. Vieira is also going to be realistic, and he's going to say, look, I've been here a long time. You came here with your family. Your youngest kid, I believe, is graduating high school this year and moving back to the States. Are you really going to stay here another 10 years or 5 years? and help me further my career. I mean, it would be understandable if Ivan decided to move on as well at some point, right? So, you put all these things together, and yeah, I don't know that it would be automatic that Patrick Vieira would jump at the chance to come over. I think you'd have to sell him on it.
And that's a shame. I don't know how we got to this point, but we're here, and it's going to be an interesting next 3 or 4 years for sure.
So Gav, as an outsider looking in, especially over the next 3 to 4 years, what do you think is the best case scenario for Arsenal Football Club? Do you think that, you made the comment that, another year or two of this isn't going to kill the brand, but do you think we may be digging too deep of a hole if the likes of Sanchez and Ozil do leave? Will it be possible to resurrect and transition the growth of the club without going through a real dark age that maybe we've seen United go through the last couple of years, or possibly even Liverpool?
It's a good question. So I don't think that Ozil and Sanchez leaving would necessarily be the end of the world. I'm not saying that they're not tremendous players, although, I know Ozil will have his critics in some quarters. But the reality is you look at their wages, you look at the wages that are required to keep them, you look at their age profile, and, you're kind of like, well, maybe we can get some money back and replace them with guys who can be as good and will be cheaper. I don't, maybe not immediately as good, but, you get, 4 guys in, and maybe 2 of them make the grade, and other guys develop, and then, that's how football clubs continue. There is life after you sell your stars. Arsenal fans, of all people, right, should know that. Because that's kind of been the story of the last.
Absolutely.
As long as we can offer the incoming guys Champions League football, which may or may not be the case this summer. That's the scary part about it.
Yeah, look.
But what are we looking at? How long before everything's okay and we can stop fighting with each other?
I mean, look, it also depends on whether Wenger stays and goes. If Wenger decides, he's going to stick around another 2 years, and next season pans out pretty much like this one, and there's still airplanes and trucks outside the Emirates and people arguing, then, it will be another lost season. Just as a season after that, if Wenger's there for that one too. I think that's just the reality of the situation. But there is, I think there are some good players who play for Arsenal. I think Arsenal's a very attractive club because of the size of the fan base, because of the stadium, because of the fact that a lot of foreign players, if they come to England, would rather come to London than go up north. So all these things put together, I think Arsenal are in a pretty good position. As far as, the Champions League football, it's not what it was back in the day where, you only had 1 or 2 clubs and everybody dreamt of playing Champions League football one day. The reality is most players Arsenal are likely to sign have probably already played Champions League football, right? It wasn't the promise of Champions League football that got you Granit Xhaka, because he's played it before. Maybe it wasn't the best example, but you know what I mean. Right?
I'm like, Gav, let's go on.
No, but look. Okay, so last summer you signed. Let's just go backwards to the players you signed, right? Mustafi had played Champions League football before, right? And he got a big raise. Xhaka had played Champions League football before, and he got an enormous raise. Lucas hadn't, as far as I know, but I'm sure he got another, he added a 0 to the end of his wages.
His hourly wage certainly increased.
Exactly.
The dollars or the pounds per moment on the field are skyrocketing for him.
Exactly. Cech had obviously been there and done that. He didn't, you gave him a chance to extend his career and continue making money and, without having to move home. And of course he took it. So, you put these things together. I don't know that it's that big a deal. You can live with a season or 2 without Champions League football, I think.
I think it can be lived through, but I worry that the difference between us and Liverpool and Manchester United might be the ownership's just absolute mania to get back there is not going to be there the same way that it was especially with United, to be sure. With the City didn't miss out on it one year, did they? They did, actually. I think. I mean, just the dedication to getting back there by ownership and writing checks is not going to be there.
Right? Like, put your Kroenke hat back on. I really think he's really going to start to care if it starts costing him money, right? If Arsenal start incurring losses or start incurring, lower profits than they incurred before. And if that happens, if he's like, oh, Christ, I really don't want to go and spend, Wenger's gone, we got a new manager in, this guy wants $150 million, I really don't want to go and spend that, and I may not, see a return for some time, and blah, blah, blah. You know what? How much do they spend? How much do they pay for the club? How much is it worth now? All right, let's find a buyer, right?
But
most people have Arsenal worth well over $1 billion. It's a lot more than he paid for it. He made a ton of money in between because Arsenal were always profitable during the Kroenke years. He's going to sell if it comes to that.
I was saying to Mike,
money anymore. That's what he's going to do.
I was saying to Mike a few podcasts ago, my concern there is that Arsenal's done such a good job at managing money and there's been such a nice nest egg. That's not necessarily, I feel, going to hit Stan immediately. So there would be a year or two that Arsenal could get re-signed before Stan would come in and say, hey, I'm starting to see the bank account have some negative in it. So it's interesting to hear, your take on that 100%, because I think from an outsider's perspective and someone that covers the game, you're kind of seeing it the same way the rest of us are. So it makes us not look as crazy as we keep appearing in the press.
No fair using Gab to make us feel better about ourselves.
But I was looking while he was saying that, and the total net spend from 96 to 2016 on Arsenal is £243 million. So he's still running transfers in that 20-year period in the positive. So it would be interesting to see. For me, the biggest highlight or the biggest takeaway from this is Arsenal can stay another 2 years if he reinvents himself like he says he's going to, and actually changes tactics in a match. And
good luck.
Right, absolutely. Like Gab said, you can give a manager £150 million to go by players. If you don't change the tactics within a match, that doesn't matter. That's thrown out the window.
Yeah, and that's starting to become, I think, with people who are concerned about Wenger, it was always, well, he's good on the field, but it's the decisions off the field that are keeping us from being competitive on the field with regards to player transfers and purchases and that sort of thing, and loyal. But this last year and a half, it's become more about tactics and inflexibility and misplaced loyalty to players and the kinds of things that start, concerning you about the coaching judgment more so than it used to be in the past, where it was all just about his noted thriftiness and unwillingness to spend money, which is something you can actually debunk in a lot of cases with facts, little known things that can be used. But that's my concern, is that the game has begun to pass him by, Gab, and he doesn't realize it because he's so used to just working things out.
Yeah, I think you're right. What I find remarkable about Wenger is that he's kind of gone in a different direction from what he was. If you think back to obviously the early great Wenger sides, you had a veteran back four that, in terms of the defensive concepts and the way they played, simply kind of applied with a lot of what they've done before under George Graham, and they had a lot of great chemistry, and so there wasn't too much tinkering to be done there. He really didn't stick up the. I know there's something Stuart Robson repeats ad infinitum, but the idea that he kind of, inherited a turnkey back four that kind of did their own thing, and he didn't mess with it. And then in front of them, he put two guys like Patrick Vieira and Manu Petit, where you had two big, strong, physical and talented guys in central midfield who in some ways were a natural shield for the back, and that created a tremendous amount of freedom for the front four and whatever else. And you look at the way that team played, and you look at the way Arsenal play now, and you would not think it's the same manager. The fingerprints are completely different. The directness that, for example, Arsenal had when Thierry Henry was there. And okay, you can say, but Thierry Henry was a one-off. I'm like, yeah, he is and he isn't. Alexis Sanchez could do some of the same things that Thierry Henry could do if you ask him to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that Wenger needs to play the football that he played 15 years ago, because the game has moved on, and you have to adapt with the times. But it is striking to me how different, in many ways, Arsenal are today compared to what they were in sort of the first 5-6 years of the Wenger era. He's obviously tried to change with the times, just kind of changed in a way that that hasn't worked the way he hoped. Well, on top of that, you throw in injuries to certain key players. I still think that Arsenal would have a fair few points off the table if Santi Cazorla hadn't gotten hurt, and some poor personnel decisions, and the thriftiness, and it all adds up to what we have now.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of alternatives, and this is our last question, Gab. I appreciate you taking so much time with us. With your obvious Italian both roots and the experience that you have covering that league, I'm sure you can kind of see the question that's coming. Everybody's talking about Max Allegri. First, would he leave Juventus for Arsenal rather than staying there or going to Barcelona? And second, do you think that he could ultimately be a good replacement for Wenger if it were to happen in the near term?
Look, if it comes down to a choice between Barcelona or Arsenal, with all due respect, I think the chance to work with Messi and whatnot. If the job's offered to him. If the job's offered to him, I think the more realistic question would be staying at Juventus versus moving to Arsenal. And I think the main difference there is Juventus are a team with a lot of veterans who are kind of built to win here and now. I think that if he wins the Champions League, he could well be off, or well be ready to take a job elsewhere. Because he's a smart enough guy to know that, managers have a bit of a cycle and a bit of a lifespan. And, after 3 years, you either become an omnipotent Ferguson, Wenger type figure at a club, or, little things start to kind of disintegrate. So I think he's very mindful of that. But by the same token, you have kind of put their eggs in this basket. You got so many stars who are in their late 20s, early 30s, from Bonucci to Chiellini to Buffon, who's obviously a lot older, to Higuain, who they spent a lot of money on, Mandzukic. So I don't think Juve, would want to start over with a different manager. So I think they would want to keep him. I think he'd prefer that to a rebuilding job. If he wins the Champions League and he gets a great deal from Arsenal, and he gets, crucially, a director of football, chief executive type that he likes and can work with, then it becomes a different matter. Then I think at that stage, he'd say, all right, well, I won my Champions League. Let's go to Arsenal, and let's go and rebuild this club, and let's all get on board. But, that's a lot of ifs. If he wins the Champions League, and, of course, if Wenger actually leaves, which is a whole other matter.
And you kind of think that would have already, that whole secession would have to have already been in the pipeline on all sides for it to be happening this summer. I can't imagine a situation where at the end of the Champions League, we still don't know whether Allegri would come or not. The announcement from Wenger if you believe what he said, is coming soon. Personally, I think it'll come in the first half tomorrow night when we take a lead on West Ham 1-0, and they rush him out there to sign his extension because it's the best moment our club has had in 2 months. But I mean, I think that's what's happening either way. But I just wanted to get your feedback on Allegri since you certainly know much more about him than most of us.
No, I mean,
and more about me as a footballer than most of us do as well, actually. So.
This is true. I think Allegri's people, they did it last summer. They reached out to a bunch of clubs. It's pretty normal. You want to see, you want to see what's out there. You want to strengthen your position vis-a-vis your own club. I am 99.9% sure that they have been in touch with Arsenal just as a level, hey, if Wenger leaves, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And these are broad brushstrokes of what we're thinking, what we're coming on, where we're coming from. So
back channel discussions.
I think if Wenger decides, if Wenger on the last day of the season says, I'm done, I'm out of here, right? Or if you win the FA Cup and Wenger says, I've gone out with a trophy, and look, we finished fourth too, miraculously somehow, and he decides that he's going, it's 1 week before the Champions League final, and you are in it, and they win it, or something happens. I think there's still enough time for Arsenal to go get themselves a lady if that's what they want to do. I think the way they've ceded control to Wenger and said, take all the time you need, Arsenal. I think the club have necessarily prepared themselves for that. You would hope, at least, because he's a smart guy, and they would have a contingency in place. But that contingency simply means that they know who to call up to start talking, rather than they've already spoken to them.
And will it be like it seems almost every summer transfer saga ends up with, where Arsenal wait too long to start making their moves, and all the chess moves have already been made ahead of ours, and we end up scrambling last minute. But
again, to me, in some ways, that's a bigger decision as Wenger, right? Because you're going to need to move very quickly, not just on the manager, but also in figuring out what you're going to do with Ozil and Alexis, right? And that's going to be absolutely critical. What you do not want is a situation where it gets to mid-August and the guy still hasn't signed his contract, or you haven't decided what you're going to do with him.
And we haven't sold him to PSG, and he ends up basically saying, okay, well, I'm not extending, I'm not leaving, and then January we have a pre-contract signed with Chelsea. That's the worst case scenario right there.
That would not be a good look, yeah.
So let's end this on an optimistic note. Gab, thank you so much for joining us today. I enjoyed our chat, both our offline chats and this one as well. It's been a real treat, and I'm sure I will be back in London at some point, although this trip is so epic that I have used all of the credit that I have in my marriage for probably the next 2 or 3 years. But I'll reach out to you because I'd love to buy you a pint. And maybe I'll bring Andy with him because his kid will be old enough by that point.
Hopefully.
Sounds great, boys. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Gab.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. I will be putting that payment for my teenage football, soccer scouting report in the mail to you shortly. And that was a thrill for us. Appreciated your time, Gab. And now you will appreciate, Andy, the pick'ems, because
I don't see how you gain points on me, considering I just picked all the same scores you did.
Okay, so first of all, an admission that you are intentionally going against you are a disgrace to your federation of game picking, because you're unabashedly admitting to trying to game the system.
The difference
legally,
between you and legally, but here's the difference between me and you. I admit my tactical abilities here, Mike. You just fucking cheated, and then you.
I did not.
I cheated. Stop
okay. So
the
guilty,
truth will come out next week when Eric Howland is on the podcast and he releases the data for
not next
Gate.
It's not next week.
Oh, so you call me a liar now?
And there will be no data unless the data itself is manipulated. So anyway, the reason I caught up with you is by nature of getting the Liverpool game head on 3-1 over Everton. So do the math, Okay. So anyway, the gaping lead that you opened up has shriveled down to 1. Andy's at 75 points. Mike at 74 points, and thanks to the wonderful picks of Michael Chrisman of the Short Fuse from last week, getting 3 games completely wrong and 2 games completely right, including the score, he kept pace with 71. So, the race here is getting tighter than I don't know, something very tight. I'm not going to go there. Guest picks for the week, by the way, this week, sent in by Bobby Chakrabarti, or as Danny likes to call him, Bobby Chakrabarti, who, again, he proved himself a listener of our podcast because his picks are in the proper style for this week. So thank you to Bobby for these. The first game is the one I'm headed off to in probably just about an hour or so, West Brom at Watford. I have been to 3 games on this trip since the Wembley game, the day after I got here, and all 3 of them so far have been draws, at Southampton, at Sutton, and then on Sunday. And another time on the podcast, I got to recap that trip to Sutton. That was something else. So obviously I have to pick a draw here, and I will go with 1-1. Andy, do we even need to ask you, or are you gonna stop being a disgrace?
I will not dignify that with a response, Mike. I have shut down. I am a victim of bullying.
Oh shit!
Cyber bullying. I will go.
And yet.
And yet what?
And yet, what draw score are you going to pick?
Hey, what did you say again?
Go back and listen.
I'm gonna go 2-1 West Brom.
Wow. Okay. It figures it'll probably end up that way.
I should
and Bobby,
just go back and edit all of the podcasts so my scores are like the exact scores of.
Yes, that'll be great. That'll be great for the one person that learns about us next week and then goes back and listens to all of our podcasts sequentially. You can do that while your wife is giving birth at the hospital. You'll be like, I'll be there in a minute. I'll be there in an hour. I'll be there in 34 hours. Bobby has West Brom to win 1-0 in a game that will put you to sleep, which I don't know if you realized I was going to that game, but thanks. May include a Tony Pulis knee slide, a la Paulo Di Canio. That would be worth the price of admission. Yep. Which reminds me, I almost forgot. I got to bring those tickets. Everton at Manchester United. I'm going to go with 2-0 United. Everton are soft on the road. Andy?
Yeah, I can't see Everton getting anything from this. I'm going to go 1-0 United.
Okay.
Mkhitaryan, 6 yards offside.
He keeps getting a yard further offside with each goal he scores in your scenarios. Bobby actually has a depleted Manchester United losing 2-1. Lukaku finally scoring a winner. Koeman to drop kick Mourinho as if he was watching WrestleMania, which did happen on Sunday night, as you'll be thrilled to find out. I did watch it from midnight to 4:30 in the morning.
Watched it, but they did have a Wenger outside at WrestleMania, didn't they?
Yes, and at Monday Night Raw, and at just about every sporting event now. It's the new John 3:16 is signs are now Wenger out signs. It's getting kind of
There was
ridiculous.
one at a Coldplay concert in China, so that was funny.
It's funny and embarrassing, all wrapped up into a creamy nougat. But Bournemouth at Liverpool. I have 3-0 Liverpool, and then I think I jotted down something to the effect of, God damn it, we're going to finish 6th.
Yeah, I was going to echo the 3-0 scoreline as well. There's just no way Bournemouth go there and get anything with the way Klopp has that team at Anfield. So 3-0 for me too.
Shocker. I'm not even going to get mad anymore. I'm just going to I'm going to pick up a point here, a point there with my exact scores, and then and then you'll have no choice but to open it up.
She said.
Bobby has Liverpool winning 3-1 with a Coutinho shot that will hit somebody in the crowd as it goes high and wide. So I'm guessing that won't be one of the goals, but he has them winning 3.
I like how that's his takeaway from the game. Coutinho just hitting someone in the stands with a wayward shot.
I will say in his defense that we almost moved the pod recording up to yesterday, and with 10 minutes before the podcast, I'm like, shit, we don't have listener pick, or we don't have a guest pick, so I DM'd him and said, "Can you get me picks in 10 minutes?" So this is the result of when you. No, but that's
that's funny.
A rather good result.
Yeah.
And then we ended up waiting a day anyway. But for short notice, this is good. City at Chelsea. I hate every single player on that pitch on Wednesday. I think it's going to be a tight game, but I think Chelsea will show how to defend against City, which was the one thing that we just weren't able to do. So I'm going with a 1-0 to Chelsea.
Ooh.
So for you, City to win what?
This is a tough one, but I'm going to go 2-1 Chelsea.
2-1 Chelsea. All right, so you echo that. Chelsea to win against City 2-0 for Bobby. Conte to continue his very good impression of the Incredible Hulk when they score. P.S. Pep is bald. So that's Bobby's pick for that one. And then finally, and thankfully, we finish with West Ham at Arsenal. I think this has the feel of a bounce-back game, although the Andy Carroll factor scares the heck out of me. He'll be licking his chops. He'll be licking everything else. And with Koscielny likely out of the game, it's just going to be like mealtime for him. But in case he doesn't already have a hat trick by halftime, I'm going to say 4-2 to Arsenal. And just pray that that's what happens. What do you think?
I'm going to say 2-0 Arsenal.
Okay. All right. And Bobby has Arsenal winning 4-1 with a Sanchez double. Carroll to score for West Ham as he normally does. And Steve Bold will do a tombstone pile driver on Bilic, which I don't think Bold could possibly pull that off. Bilic would reverse the hold, and Bold would be on the ground whining and crying. Even as tough as Stevie Bold was, you don't fuck with Slaven Bilic. You just don't.
Nope.
So thank you, Bobby, for those picks. We may be skipping the weekend games because we're not planning on potting between now and then. Other than West Ham, we've got Palace actually on Monday night next week. I mean, these two games should be 6 points, man. I mean, we could see an announcement from Arsene Wenger after the next win. What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to come whenever there's a win. It's coming. I mean, if he was leaving, he would have said he was leaving.
Yeah. I mean, there's no sense in saying,
there's no sense.
in June I'm leaving, like we talked about with
No,
Dad.
yeah. If you say you're leaving, you unite the fan base. We've talked about that before. So it's like, it's just come out and say, like, hey, I'm staying. You know, let's just get this over and done with. If he would have done it before the international break, Mike, this would be we wouldn't be talking about it anymore. So,
right.
yeah.
And if it does happen, in between the next two games, I mean, please let it happen then, so that I can be in town and observe the absolute mayhem that's going to occur one way or the other. I mean, it'll be fascinating to say the least. But yeah, that's so we should be able to take some points out of that. If we don't, my God, just help us.
So, Mike, just before we wrap up the pod, I just want to say Arsenal just released the team news for tomorrow, so we can get this out if people are going to listen between today and tomorrow. So, Oxlade-Chamberlain and Aaron Ramsey have a test today. We will see if they can be involved. I think there's a good chance they'll be back in the squad. Apart from that, we lost Koscielny. It's an Achilles problem. If he's ruptured a few fibers of his tendon, it could be a few weeks. If it's an inflammation, he could be available for selection next week against Palace. At the moment, I think a scan is today, and we'll know much more tomorrow. Mertesacker is in the squad.
Shouldn't you be reading this in a French accent?
No. Mertesacker, he's been out for a long, long time, but he's been available for a while, for a long time. He's worked very hard physically, but he lacks competition. and Czech is unavailable for tomorrow as well.
All right, so Mertesacker will be on the bench.
Minimum, he's on the bench.
That'll be an interesting lineup to see tomorrow. But let's do it. We're stuck on 69 countries. We didn't add any, but if there's a place to be stuck, that's where it should be.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We need to go straight from 69 to 100 if we're going to do anything like that. So that's about it, man. Good week. We have hopefully a happy podcast next week on Monday or Tuesday. And anything else you want to add?
No. Enjoy the match tonight, and I'm sure we'll stay connected via text. And let's go ahead and let's turn things around, Arsenal. Come on now.
Yeah, let's make a run of it. Let's do what we did after the Swansea game last year, where things looked darkest, and then suddenly it was win after win after win. So let's see if we can get that done. Come on, you Gooners.